5 months since the PC 1.0 release emerged from 3 long years in early access, Graven launches on current-gen consoles in a much better technical state. However, a more stable, optimized build with solid gamepad controls can't offset several frustrating mechanics, persistent jank, and bugs that remain after several major patches. As a result, Graven on console remains just as flawed as it is compelling. If this console release is your first exposure to Graven, it's primarily a retro-styled first-person shooter, though a big part of the negative reception it received during development was what many thought Graven would be. It was often referred to as a spiritual sequel to Hexen. Think a Quake clone with a focus on wielding magic instead of firearms and light puzzling mixed in with key hunts. But ultimately it emerged as an awkward hybrid of different genres. Everything comes together well enough in the first act, the one that benefited directly from early access feedback, but it slowly unravels in the later acts as infuriating mechanics, constant jank, and a succession of bugs take their toll on your patience. Starting with the good, Graven has a great setting and premise, with the protagonist, a priest of the orthogonal order, regaining consciousness on a raft travelling through fetid swamps towards the plague-ridden town of Cruxforth at the edge of the known empire. He was exiled for striking down a fellow priest attempting to sacrifice his daughter, condemned to death for breaching his oath, and is now left stranded with a staff, the newfound ability to wield forbidden magics, and no idea if his daughter survived. With few options, he sets out to find redemption by aiding the townsfolk and investigating the nearby mansion archive of his order. Storytelling is kept to a minimum if you're unwilling to read updating journal entries, but it's still a great opening that kicks off a grueling journey through Gothic-inspired ruins, mansions and swamps, snow and windswept mountain forests, an elaborate mechanical manor and an imposing castle falling into the void, and a desert city full of temples and catacombs slowly collapsing into sand-filled canyons. If nothing else, Graven excels at creating a palpable atmosphere of malice and dread, with visuals that feel suitably retro, or retaining sprawling environments as detailed, dense, and vertical as you might expect from a modern title. The visuals are backed up by stiff but gruesome character models, over-the-top gore that'll entertain those who missed the classic giving effect, creepy ambience and layered audio that'll have you constantly checking corners in a panic, and an excellent soundtrack, with several pieces that feature haunting choir-like chants. Given the gameplay is a mixed bag, the quality of the presentation is essential to making simple progression, platforming, puzzling, and secret hunting so enjoyable, as you explore every inch of large, interconnected zones, and discover shortcuts back to hub areas. Of course, there's no shortage of classic undead creatures, deranged cultists, and eldritch abominations standing in your way, but combat in Graven takes a long time to feel anything like the fast-paced classic first-person shooters that supposedly inspired it. Even on the easiest difficulties, getting surrounded often means death, while ammunition, health, mana and armor are in short supply for most of the opening half. Combat can be thrilling as you juggle resources and avoid damage, but it never feels particularly well balanced as the game tries to straddle a line between classic 90s FPS, a Souls-like adventure that takes a chunk of gold essential for equipment upgrades when you die and respawn, and an immersive sim that rewards using elemental powers and a useful kick in combination with water or explosive barrels. Aside from 3 major boss fights and well-stocked arenas, exercises in patience rather than aiming, combat is best avoided as you'll want to conserve resources for when you find yourself a long way from the hub towns, and no desire to restart from the hub when you load a save. If that's a design that sounds engaging to you, it is, but only when it works as intended. Returning to my opening statement, Graven is in much better technical state for the console launch. It's not crashed on me in over 20 hours of play, or the performance on the Xbox Series consoles, even the Series S, is far better than I experienced playing the 1.0 PC release on an RTX 3070 gaming laptop that can typically match Series X settings. It looks sharp and feels smooth on a 4K display, though you can notice rare drops in some hub areas and the odd stutter when loading into a new map zone. The default gamepad sensitivity has been refined, and a stronger auto-aim helps when dealing with smaller flying or scurrying foes. Sadly, customization is limited and there are some unused buttons that should have been used for quick swapping weapons or switching back to the magic tone without having to scroll through the hotbar. Now, while I'm a fan of some of Graven's jank, like bypassing developer-intended routes with creative platforming and object stacking, cheesing tougher foes by getting them stuck, watching enemy models ragdoll into the distance. There are still balance issues, frustrating or inconsistent mechanics, and broken side quests. Some examples include how upgrading any melee weapon other than the staff still feels pointless, while using chain lightning and the alt fire mode of an upgraded fletch hunt gun can still see you through the entire game. Another example is how enemy and item respawns remain a complete mystery. Enemies often respawn behind you for cheap shots. Containers with health, mana and ammunition don't respawn until you've travelled several zones away, making some deaths doubly annoying. And I once fell into a ravine only to respawn directly above it, and die repeatedly until I quit to the menu and restarted from the hub. Thankfully, I encountered no major issues with the primary quests, but side quests still break easily due to missing items or inactive puzzle elements. Some of the side quests that I failed to complete on the PC version I could this time, while others that I completed on the PC version were broken in this playthrough. Wrapping up, Graven is a game I can't stop playing, but I also can't recommend it without caveats. The retro-styled atmospheric presentation, exploration, secret hunting, and even the resource juggling combat are engaging. But the longer you play, the more frustrating it becomes as you deal with inconsistent enemy and item spawns, numerous cheap deaths, and the potential for broken side quests. It's a shame these issues have not been resolved, as even if the second and third act don't match the quality of the first, you can still see glimpses of what could have been an incredible hybrid of a game that caters to different playstyles. I'd still tentatively recommend Graven for fans of the genre, but I also can't help but wonder how much better it might have turned out if the developer had reined in the scope and focused on polish.
If you've got this far, please consider giving the video a like and maybe subscribing to our channel as it helps us grow.